Welcome to the US Daily Brief YouTube channel. More than 9 months have passed since the first Russian troops entered Ukraine on February 24th. Although 276 days have passed, the Russian army is still trying to reach some of its goals. In the south, the Ukrainian army is creating the conditions for the liberation of the eastern bank of Dnipro River after the liberation of the western part of the Kherson province and the capital city of Kherson. However, the forced crossing of one of Europe's largest rivers will require substantial resources. It seems more likely that the Ukrainians will wait until spring before launching an offensive on the eastern bank of the Dnipro, but this will give the Russian army plenty of time to improve their fortifications. The south of the Donbass is the only place on the entry battlefield where the Russian army holds some kinds of offensive initiative, but Moscow achieved nothing with this attempt. For most of 4 months, Russian forces tried to capture Bakhmut and Avdiivka, but with little success. Russian forces are building extensive defensive lines in the area, including anti-tank trenches, anti-tank walls, and missiles of trenches. However, the Ukrainian military continues to gain an advantage when it comes to the long-range precision weapons, and Ukrainian forces can use the M142 high-motion artillery rocket systems, the M270 multi-launch rocket systems, and the M777 with 982 Excalibur ammunition. 155mm howitzers are used to target, disrupt, and destroy the Russian defense at the specific points, thus making it easier to break through the Russian defenses. The Ukrainian defenses held fast and the Russian forces lost thousands of men and weapon systems in their attempts to capture the two cities. Russian leader who lost thousands of soldiers and ammunition takes a series of decisions in order to restore the lost power of his army. Desperate Russian leader who is left without a military is declaring mobilization again. Russia will launch a new wave of covert mobilization on 10 December. In the Russian Federation and the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine, preparations are being made for the next wave of covert mobilization of the ranks of the Russian occupation forces starting on 10 December. Russian invading troops continue to regroup to strengthen their divisions and troops in the Lyman, Avdiivka, and Novopavlivka directions. The last day, the units of the Ukrainian defense forces repelled the Russian attacks on the settlements of Stelmakivka in the Luhansk region and Bilogorivka, Marinka, Verkhnyo-Kamiensky, and Spern in the Donetsk region. The defeats and blows of Russia in the relentless war that has been going on for about 10 months become legendary. But the Russian leader has no intention of giving up. Despite the successful advance of the Ukrainian warriors, Vladimir Putin, determined to continue this war, is struggling to strengthen his army. The Russian leader, who had mobilized 300,000 people before, is not yet clear how many innocent Russian men will be affected by his new mobilization move. However, Putin will undermine himself with this move. Probably the Russian people will show the necessary reaction to this new mobilization move. It is only a matter of time before protests and riots flare up again in Russia. The people whose nerves are afraid by the failure of the Ukrainian occupation will not want to send their children to death once again. The days are approaching when Vladimir Putin will face an anger of the Russian people. This is no end to the cruelty commitment by the Kremlin, which is writing in desperation. Russia, which lost tens of thousands of soldiers against Ukraine, recruited many prisoners to its army a month ago through the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group is again stepping in to save Mr. Putin, but this time the claims are quite annoying. According to the information we learned, the Russian invaders pressure African students to join the war against Ukraine. In Russia, students from Africa are recruited to PMC Wagner to fight in the war against Ukraine. If they refuse, the tuition fee may be increased and the scholarship may be cancelled. Russian officials at the South Federal University in the city of Rostov-on-Don, close to the Ukrainian border, pressure African students at the institution to join Putin's forces in the war in eastern Ukraine. Those who make these claims are 3 African students studying at the university and exposed to this threat. Officials at SFEDU tried to persuade them to accept an offer from the Russian military or the Wagner Group, claiming that both were willing to pay foreigners willing to go to war in Ukraine up to $3,000 to $5,000, respectively. Students say some schools officials had warned them that the Russian government might refuse some privileges, including increasing tuition fees and canceling scholarships for some international students if they don't accept the offer. A Nigerian student, the school officials met us at our hostel and tried very hard to persuade us to fight for Russia. They briefly said that we could fight in Ukraine, earn money, and then return to Russia to continue our education. They met many African students, he said. The students never have any thoughts or desires to join the war. There are even students who have sworn not to join the war, but the pressure on students is increasing day by day. We briefly summarize the developments on the Russian front. While Russia is preparing to end with its own hands every day, the good news for the Ukrainian army continues to come. 12 more Ukrainians returned from Russian captivity. Ukraine extradited 12 students from Russian captivity, 8 military and 3 civilians, one of them who is considered missing. Andriy Yermak, head of the office of the President of Ukraine, announced this good news via Telegram. Andriy Yermak said, "Another prisoner of war exchange. We managed to free 12 of our people. Among them 4 Navy soldiers, 2 National Guards, border guards, and one of them from the territorial defense. There are also 3 civilians, a family couple and another man were captured. There are 2 officers, 7 privates, and non-commissioned officers among them." He noted that among the soldiers were defenders of Mariupol, Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and Snake Island. At the same time, the head of the presidential office recalled that this week 98 Ukrainians were extradited from Russian captivity. The fact that the Ukrainian heroes have returned to their homes and sprinkled some water on the burning hearts, but the brutality of the war continues unabated. The Ukraine war cost trillions of dollars. The war in Ukraine looks set and extend into 2023 and perhaps behind. While it is not easy to predict or even grasp, the world has lost trillions of dollars in economic growth due to the conflict and caused hundreds of billions of damage to Ukraine, and most of all, many lives were lost. In addition to direct damage, there are indirect losses from loss of agricultural production, soil population, and population displacement. However, the cost of war to Russia is rising and will ultimately have a huge impact on Russian living standards. In short term, there are direct budgetary burden of supporting a major military operation, and Western sanctions are skewing both exports and imports. The impact of sanctions manifests itself in unexpected ways. The lack of heavy-duty ball bearings, all imported from Sweden and the USA, has forced Russian railways to withdraw 10,000 railway freight cars from service. The Russian economy has suffered deep wounds in the face of Western sanctions. If Russia had not unjustly invaded Ukraine, both economic and social life would not have been so severely injured. The size of the war is growing day by day, and its end does not seem possible for now. We are watching how the Russian leader Putin ruined the lives of the citizens of both countries. There is an ongoing war and lives shaken by constant losses, and it's really hard to predict when this situation will end. Goodbye until we meet you with new developments.